Yeah, so my brother, father, and sister, and in fact my sister-in-law, they're all medical professionals, doctors in Minnesota. And my father also happens to be, well, I mean, you would call him a hobbyist photographer, but in fact he's an excellent photographer, basically at a professional level, but just not doing it professionally. And he started taking this series of portraits of his colleagues wearing their PPE. So masks, shields, sometimes full gowns, and all the various things that physicians have had to outfit themselves with to protect themselves during the pandemic. But the focus of the pictures is not really on that PPE, but on the eyes of the subjects that he's taking. And at some point he had 400 or 500 of these. And he wrote to me and asked, hey, would you like to write a piece that in some way showcases these photographs? And as I was dwelling on that and thinking about the possibilities, and my father eventually reached out to me and said, hey, I've got all these pictures. Would you be interested in writing a piece that showcases them in some way? And Hockett had actually just been in touch with me about their amazing initiative, What 2020 Sounds Like, and had asked me if I would be interested in contributing a 15 or 30 or 45-second piece to this. So I wrote them back and I said, hey, thank you so much, sounds great. How about I write you a 10-minute piece, which I'm going to set to video and have all these other elements, live narrator and all these other things instead. Hockett being Hockett, they said, okay, great, yeah, sounds good, let's try it. And that's how I Slow Down was born. And in the piece, I mean, there are many things to say about it, but eventually probably the most important fundamental thing is just that every note or chord that they play in the piece represents one death in Minnesota during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, that question of balance is a hard one at the best of times. And right now, during the pandemic, with us all sort of locked indoors, it takes on new meaning, doesn't it? But I guess what I would say is that I was someone who, for a long time, I just wanted to be a composer. That's really what I thought I was going to do. But as I went on in my studies, at the end of my master's degree at the Royal Academy of Music, I did a recording session of my work, which was tied to a film session, and just being in the studio, I loved it so much that I thought, wow, I've got to check out more about this. I got to see what's going on. And slowly started picking up things which, now I have, well, one strand of my career is as a recording engineer and producer. Then when I was doing my doctorate at Guildhall, I founded Riot Ensemble. That's, these guys that I'm representing. I'm still the artistic director there and chief conductor, and that's become, curating and conducting has become another big strand in my work. I guess what I would say about those things is that it's always kind of happened organically for me. Like I really didn't set out to pick up one or to pick out the other. They were just the kind of opportunities in front of me that I pursued and that I enjoyed and that kind of flowered. And the other thing I would say is that I always found, I mean, I am a composer. Like I would say that. If you ask me, what do? I'm a composer. Although the truth is I really only do that for a couple of hours every morning. I just don't have time to do it more than that. But I do write music every single morning. I sit at that piano, get up, I make my coffee, I sit at that piano, and I'm writing. And I do that every single day. And it's probably the only thing that I do every day, aside from being a husband and being a dad. So I am a composer. But these other things, as I picked them up, what I realized is that I was the kind of person who kind of took energy from these things. So a lot of those people you describe, they sometimes have to like carve out a special time just to compose because these other things take their headspace. But for me, my recording work, for example, it feeds right back into my work as a composer. I'll just give you one example of that. I recorded an album at the end, middle of last year, or 2 years ago now. Who can keep track of time? It was an amazing work of piano music by Christopher Fox with the pianist John Schneiders. And in that work, in one of the pieces in that CD, Christopher had this technique which just really struck me, which was he had this chord repeated over and over and over again, but the pianist was instructed through the notation to bring out one note. So you might have a 10-note chord, but you hear like this note, 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 and then it could repeat in this kind of way or build up and come down. And it was this way of notating this thing that pianists all do instinctively, this color thing, and I never thought about it before. And it opened up a whole world for me, and I use that in this piece that you're going to hear with Hackett in I Slow Down. It seemed like this technique that was very tied to this expressive thing I was after, because you might have a chord of, say, 14 notes, but each time that chord is played, that's someone dying, it's a death. I mean, it's not literally someone dying, of course, but that is the emotional impact of it, and that was the weight of it. And so there was this way of having this chord, this universal thing, but pulling out one voice each time. So each chord, each attack has that individuality, is a universe. And I would never have discovered that technique if it was, just me. Well, I mean, I know Christopher's music, so maybe I would have come across it. But yeah, it's just one example of the ways that recording has fed back into my life. And of course, there are many more of those. As a conductor, I'm constantly coming into contact with work and composers and musicians and ideas that I wouldn't have come into contact all on my own. And for me, well, that just like feeds me. That's just energy, 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 energy. And it all kind of circles back and goes into my composing. To some degree, I have to say, I've actually been finding it much harder to compose these days without that, without the kind of regular input from other musicians and other times and other eras. A lot of my recording, maybe we're recording Schubert, or maybe we're recording Ruth Gibbs, or maybe we're recording, some album with Ensemble Recherche. These things can be from all over the world and all different time periods and all different types of composers. And that, for me, is something that's always fed into my work and given me a lot of energy. So I miss that, and I'm really looking forward to it returning. Yeah, so in some ways it's a short answer. I mean, the first time I met Hackett, I actually met Thomas. I met Thomas first at the Aspen Music Festival. We were both there as composers. And I mean, I loved Thomas from the moment I met him. I remember meeting him in the tent on the first day. They like tell you all the composers are sitting like way over there, so you go find the other like 10 composers or however many it is there. And we got on from the very beginning and had a wonderful summer, revolving around music, but from everything to like, late night drinking to early morning bike rides across that landscape. It was really a special time, and I met in Thomas a colleague that I adore and admire. And so I was really happy when he asked me about the possibility of writing a piece for Hackett. Now, I mentioned earlier in this interview, whether or not you use it or not, I don't know, but I mentioned that the piece you're going to hear on the PianoSpheres concert, that started with Hackett asking me, okay, do you want to write like a 15-second piece? And then I, turned up with this 8-minute behemoth or 10-minute behemoth. The first time Thomas asked me to write a piece for Hackett, he said, why don't you write us, a 5 or 6 minute piece, something like fun and a kind of showstopper that we can have. And I thought about it for a while, and I went back to him and I said, yeah, how about a 35-minute set of piano variations that also include like a movement entirely inside the piano and like balloons under the piano and 2 toy pianos and all of these things. And I mean, by that time, I had met Sarah as well, and really, as always, they were just incredibly generous and incredibly positive. And they just said yes. They just said, okay, sure, let's try it. Let's see what comes. And I mean, to this day, it's this piece, Remember Me, which is the first, that set of variations on Dido's Lament that I wrote for them. It to this day is my most performed piece, because they invested so much time and energy into it, learning it, and then performing it all up and down the West Coast. It remains an extremely special experience for me, and I'm so excited to be back and working with them again on I Slow Down now, this second piece. Yeah, in some ways it's a difficult question, because this is only well, actually, technically this is my third piece for Hackett. There's a very small piece in the middle that they haven't yet had the chance to do yet, because of the way the pandemic hit. But, you know, 2 or 3 pieces, it's the beginning of a relationship. And it's a funny thing to say, because for most, I mean, I'm a composer, and I know, for most ensembles that I've written for, I write one piece, and that's it. That's the last piece I'll ever get to write for that ensemble, the last music of mine that they'll ever have to play. And you don't get to develop this relationship and build and see what comes. But I think that already you can see in these pieces, or I can start to see the results of knowing the musicians. I mean, if nothing else, there are bars in this piece, and even in the first piece actually, that I wouldn't have dared to write if I didn't know I'm working with not just 2 composers who are going to understand that a composer is imperfectly trying to write down their deepest dreams and darkest desires for the musicians to accomplish, but knowing that Thomas and Sarah are committed, yes, but generous. So generous in how they approach and perform music. And what I mean by that is just bringing every ounce of their own ability to argue for the piece. And that's really a rare thing. To have an interpreter who, you know, again, understands what a composer is trying to do and how imperfectly that action happens at the best of times, but who wants the piece to succeed, who wants the audience to understand, to grasp what the composer is trying to express. And that means that as a composer, you can be daring. It's not just about virtuosity, because there are virtuosic things in this piece, but this piece is not perhaps, I mean, I want to be careful because they worked very hard on it, but it's not perhaps the most, I mean, it's certainly not the most difficult thing they've ever played, because they played my earlier piece, which was much, much harder than this one. But there are aspects of this piece that simply do not work unless, as an ensemble, you take the time to deeply understand the musical concept and to be able to express it through very subtle things like voicing and tiny time thing, you know, slight rubatos, things that have to happen for the piece to have its impact. And knowing who they are, they're, again, I mean, I just keep coming back to generosity of spirit, on top of, you know, absolute sheer quality and virtuosity. Well, that has deeply impacted, and even consciously impacted, choices I made in writing this piece. As to the overall effect and where it's going, I mean, I guess I can only say that I hope in another decade, when I'm writing my 6th piece for Hackett, I'll be able to come back and say, you know, yeah, this relationship was just fundamental to my development as an artist and my discovery of this particular thing in my voice that I've always been trying to nail down and express, and now it's there, you know, or this thing I guess, has come into focus. When you work with musicians over and over again, I see this as a conductor with Riot Ensemble, I see this as a composer with Hockett. It maybe isn't about a discovery of a new thing or some like totally off the wall thing that you never thought of. It's just, it's kind of this, the way, you know, the way that a camera comes into focus when you turn the knob, and it's suddenly like you see it clearly, you see it crisply. Yes, this is the idea. And what I have to say is that when I was imagining this piece, I slowed down, and my father had asked me about it, and I was thinking about it, and I was kind of, should I write it like this? Should it be this piece? Should it be maybe for this solo? Should it be for that? When Hockett then asked me, do you want to write this piece for what 2020 sounds like? Suddenly, this piece came into focus, and I was like, I know what the piece sounds like, I know where it's going, I know what I have to compose, and that's what I did. So, thank you. That's all I can say. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all of you for joining us. I really am looking forward to the performance and to sharing the piece with you.